pilots grouping ALPA India has mulled legal recourse to be part of Air India plane crash probe. The pilots grouping has said that it is mulling legal recourse to have its members as part of the investigation into the Air India Boeing 7878 plane crash, which is a day after alleging that AAIB's preliminary report suggests a bias towards pilot error. The Airline Pilots Association of India, or the ALPA India, represents over 800 pilots of airlines and helicopter companies in the country. It is a member of the International Federation of Airlines Pilots Association, which claims to have 1 lakh pilots from across 100 countries as its members. Now, against the backdrop of the AAIB's preliminary report, representatives of ALPA India will meet officials of the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, or the DGCA, today to discuss various issues. All right, let's tell you how AI-171 lost lift mid-air. Fuel switch is under focus as there has been, a lot of talk after that preliminary report. First of all, engine 1 and 2 fuel switches transition from run to cutoff is what the preliminary report suggests. It also says that both engines' fuel switches were cut off with a time gap of just 1 second. The report also goes to say that the engine's RPMs begin to fail as fuel supply to the engine was cut off. That is something, that is a natural progression when this kind of an error occurs in the cockpit. One pilot is supposed to have asked, why did you cut off fuel switch? The other denies it, saying, I did not cut it off. But seconds later, remember, engine 1 switch transitions from cutoff to run. So there was an effort to recover these engine, but 4 seconds later, engine 2 switch transitions from cutoff to run as well. Now, the report also goes on to say that engine 1's core deceleration stopped. It starts progress to recovery. As I said, that in the cockpit, there were attempts made to recover these 2 engines. The report also says engine 2 relights, but it could not arrest deceleration and begin recovery. That, ladies and gentlemen, has been by far what the state said, what this report states. But remember, the pilot's last conversation, what was it? The lens is on the fuel cutoff switch. Pilot 1, as this preliminary report suggests, asks, why did you cut off the fuel switch? To which the pilot number 2 says, I did not. This is as per the report of what was happening inside the cockpit. Captain Sumit Sabharwal, who was the 60-year-old pilot, the senior-most pilot on board, he had 8,200 flying hours. He was weeks away from retirement. He lived in Mumbai's Powai. Meanwhile, the first officer, Clive Kundar, he was son of former Air India flight attendant. He was trained at the Bombay Flying Club. He had 1,100 plus flying hours, and he had worked with 5 years with Air India. That, ladies and gentlemen, has been by far the details that have emerged. But what we are getting to know at the moment is, as per sources, the US Federal Aviation Administration and Boeing have privately issued notifications that the fuel switch locks on Boeing planes are safe. A document seen by media agency Reuters has shown this, and 4 sources with knowledge of the matter have said so. In fact, the FAA's continued airworthiness notification on the 11th of July came after the preliminary report into Air India's Boeing 7878 crash that killed 260 people. It raised questions over the engine fuel cutoff switches. That, of course, ladies and gentlemen, is what the notification is by Boeing. A lot of questions have been raised on how safe Boeing aircraft is, especially the 787. My colleague Hina is joining us with more on this. Hina, get us more details of what this notification is all about. What is the company saying?
Well, what we can tell you, Shreya, is that ever since AAIB has released the preliminary report as far as AI-171 Boeing Dreamliner's crash in Ahmedabad is concerned, the spotlight is on the fuel switch, the engine fuel switch. Now, as per that report, in the plane that crashed, it was a Boeing Dreamliner. The fuel switch, in fact, had transitioned from run to cutoff, and that's when perhaps the supply of fuel to the engine stopped suddenly, and that's where the crisis really began. Now, in that preliminary report, interestingly, the AAIB investigating authority here has made a mention of the advisory of FAA of 2018 with regard to the locking system of these engine fuel switches. Now, the entire world is, focusing on that particular aspect. Now, this is as per reports that you also, mentioned just now. As per reports, as per sources, the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, US FAA, and Boeing have finally issued notifications that the fuel switch locks of Boeing planes are safe. Now, this is as per reports. But Shreya, what is very important is that even if these kind of messages are being sent, what I can tell you is that there are some airlines across the world which have now started taking the fuel switch system very, very seriously. Even though Boeing is saying that and FAA is saying that everything is fine, it's all safe, it's just a precautionary measure. Despite that, we have an airline called as Etihad that after that particular advisory has in fact asked all its pilots to be extremely cautious. Etihad has
Stay with me. I'll get our viewers what you're talking about. Etihad Airlines specifically issuing an advisory for Boeing Dreamliners. Viewers, that's what we're getting at the moment. Etihad has asked its pilots to exercise caution with fuel control switches on Boeing 787s. In fact, the airline has also ordered inspection of the locking mechanism. That's the latest that is coming in. Hina, you were talking about how Etihad has issued advisories, and Etihad is one of the many airlines who are now focusing on the locking mechanism.
That's right, because what happened with this Boeing 787 aircraft, the Dreamliner, the way it crashed, it sent shockwaves not just in India but across the world, especially among aviation sector stakeholders. Now, even though it is an advisory, a note of caution by Boeing, but it seems that an airline like Etihad does not want to take it lightly. And that is the reason why, as a precautionary measure, Etihad has now issued the advisory to the pilots. Etihad has asked all its pilots to exercise extreme amount of caution when it comes to fuel control switches, especially on the Dreamliner jets. Etihad, not just that, has also in fact ordered the inspection of fuel control switch locking mechanism, which is under the scanner after this preliminary report came out. Because even though many people, after looking at the preliminary report of this Air India crash, are pointing towards some kind of a pilot error here, but then there are experts who are raising questions on the fuel locking mechanism, and that's precisely the reason why the advisory was also mentioned in this particular report. And now airlines across the world do not want to take any chances. We'll have to wait and watch whether in India, Air India also issues this kind of a direction. If anything comes from DGCA for the airlines as well to exercise this particular caution, Etihad has asked its own pilots to do when it comes to the fuel switch mechanism.
Right. So even as Boeing clarifies, saying their mechanisms are safe, airlines across the world still have their suspicions around the safety of the Boeing 787s. Hina, thanks very much for joining us at the moment, getting us the latest as far as aviation safety is concerned. Viewers, we will keep getting you more on this. Right now, it's time for a short break. News and updates will continue on the other side.